This lesson is about setting the session ID in a JSP page without using tags. You can make specific method calls to rewrite a URL and add the session ID to it, and it will do it only if you need to have it done. The first thing that's done in the JSP page is to get the context path. This isn't specifically a part of encoding, but it does help in the construction of a URL. It's the first part of the path for this page. It's the context of this page without this page being included. It can be used as the first part of the URL for any other page that is in this same context. I've been doing without this up until now, but it's a good idea to include it in case the program gets deployed in some special way. This will take care of those special cases. Here, the URL of a servlet is constructed by adding the context string onto the front of the name of the servlet. This is the servlet from the previous lesson, and all it does is display the session ID. The URL of the target page is passed to the encode URL method, and that call returns the URL with a session ID added to it. But it only tags on the session ID if the browser doesn't accept cookies, so however the URL comes back to you from this method, it is encoded in the proper form to be included as a link. This method returns the session ID. It doesn't matter how the session ID is being passed to the new page. This method will always return it as a string. The first thing displayed by this page is the session ID. That's so it can be compared to the value that appears in other places. The next thing that's displayed on the page is the encoded URL. It may or may not include the session ID. Finally, the encoded URL is used to construct a link. This page has a lot of extra stuff in it, but all you really need to do is pass your URLs through the call to encode URL and use the return string in your links. Here is a web browser with the cookies disabled, forcing the session ID to be appended to the URL. Here you see the session ID displayed at the top. The URL after it has been encoded to contain the session ID, and then there's a link to the page. Here you can see that the link is constructed to carry the entire session ID with it. And now here's the page that displays this session ID. You can see that the same session ID followed the link to the next page. That was with cookies turned off. Now I'll set the browser so it allows cookies. Now the page looks a little different. The session ID still shows up at the top of the page, so the session is defined, but it doesn't show up as a part of the URL. The encoded URL method was called, but because the cookies are enabled, it wasn't necessary to do anything with the URL. You can see the link this way. Here you can see the link was constructed without the session ID added to it. But here is the other page, and it successfully retrieved the session ID.